Hi, my name is Nora Frost, and I will be doing my presentation on prejudice and justice in the courtroom. Now, when we think about prejudice, we usually think about our internal thoughts that often lead to the act of discrimination. And in class, we talked about implicit bias, which is the term used to describe the way that humans think without even consciously knowing it. That's opposed to explicit bias, which is when we know what we're thinking about. And really, implicit bias can infiltrate any aspect of life, but what I think is most important, what's most relevant to this class, is how implicit bias influences the legal system. Now, this presentation will look through implicit bias through three groups. One is race, another is gender, and another is sexuality. And basically, I will be using the class notes on diversity inclusion and also the video that we watched in class about implicit bias training for judges to talk about how that we really need to include women of color and LGBTQIA plus people in the legal system, and further have extensive training on implicit biases for current judges and attorneys. So first I will be talking about the group of race. This is most impactful when we're thinking about how every single race is overrepresented in our criminal justice system except for white people. Now, Black people make up 13% of the overall US population, yet 38% of the incarceration population. If we think about it, the US has the largest incarceration rate out of any country in the world. Yet 39 out of 93 district courts have all white judges, where only one district court has all people of color as judges, and that is Puerto Rico. Now, this is really impactful when you think about how white people have implicit biases against Black people historically. That's why we have, yes. And also, it can change how a jury perceives the criminal defendant as well. The most egregious example of this is the George Floyd case, in which a police officer knelt and killed George Floyd, who was a Black man. Now, Derek Chauvin, who was a police officer, only got 25 years in jail in federal prison, and the two police officers that were also on the scene only got 3 years. To put this in perspective, Black people are 20% more likely to have a longer sentence than white people when we look at the criminal justice system. Now, this can impact how judges perceive their implicit biases when looking at sentencing. In the video that we saw in class, we saw that all judges, even judges of color, had an implicit bias against people of color. And this can impact how they sentence and how they make certain decisions in the courtroom. And this is why we need better training against implicit biases so that they can recognize when their implicit biases are taking hold and make actions to further decrease that bias. Now, implicit bias training has a history of controversy. Most people don't think that it actually works. Yet the NIH, the National Institute of Health, shows that we actually really need more research into creating a training that is more effective than is actually what is already in place. But I think it can be argued that the training that is already in place is already better than having no training at all when we're looking at these judges and attorneys when perceiving it. We also need more people of color who are judges and attorneys, because if they're overrepresented in the justice system, they should be overrepresented in the attorneys and judges field. Now, going on to women make up about 38% of lawyers. This is just historically, most men were lawyers and most women were told to stay at home and not work. And this, even though it's better now, we still see this when men look and don't perceive women as that they don't look like lawyers, and this is also intensely true for women of color. There are also three main objectives that I outlined in my paper, and that is that there is still a wage gap in the legal field, as there is in most fields, but 70 non-equity partners make about 78% of men non-equity partners, which is a significant gap when we're thinking about how much money is in the legal industry. There is also a lot of cases of sexual assault. 50% of women has experienced unwanted sexual conduct by a coworker, which isn't too surprising when we think about the nature of our country, but also it really needs to be changed. Also, there's an ignorance of men thinking that their firm represents and respects women when really women disagree with that statement entirely. Now, another aspect of gender in the courtroom is in family law, because many judges, because of their implicit biases, would assume that the mother is more capable of raising children or having custody of children than the father, just because of our traditional gender roles that women should be more nurturing, more caring towards women. When in reality, a lot of the time, maybe men might be more nurturing, more caring of the child, and it should not be looked at on the basis of gender itself. That being said, LGBTQ people are also overrepresented in prisons as opposed to in the country. They are incarcerated at 3 times the rate of the total adult population. Now, LGBTQIA plus peoples only make up 3.7% of lawyers, and there isn't an actual percentage of judges because it's so small a number. And this shows a really push to get more lawyers and more judges who are LGBTQIA+, because now we have, with the overturning of Roe by Dobbs, the marriage equality decision is also at risk. And so there's a big controversy over if gay judges should decide on straight cases, on people who are straight on their cases. And I think it could be argued that Obergefell v. Hodges, which was the main case that has marriage equality, was decided by 9 judges who identified as straight. So so it could be proven that this really doesn't have that much of an impact as people say it does. And also, if we implement better implicit bias training, maybe this wouldn't be a problem at all. Now, in conclusion, the Sixth Amendment has the right to a fair trial. And you can only have a fair trial when there aren't any biases that could potentially harm your case, or if your case won't be decided perfectly, won't be decided repetitively through different judges and through different jury selections, the same result, right? That's scientific method. But so we know that we can't fully eliminate bias in the courtroom totally, but it helps if we have women of color and if we have people who identify as LGBTQIA+ people who are actively working as judges and attorneys, because if they are overrepresented in the criminal justice system, they should be overrepresented in the legal system itself. And only then can we fully eliminate bias in our system and make it actually fair to everyone involved. Thank you.